A few weeks ago we talked about a man who met Jesus while he was social distancing. This man wasn't doing it because of a virus or anything, but because he was an extremely unpopular person. He was a tax collector. Well, this week we're going to look at another man who met Jesus whilst social distancing, although this time the reason is connected to an illness. This man had an illness that, at the time, specifically mandated social distancing to a huge degree. This man had leprosy. That meant he had to socially distance from everyone except other people who also had it. So this man we're going to look at, whose name we don't know, was part of a group, or a social bubble if you want, of others who had this same illness and were self-isolating together. Let's take a look at what happened when this man met Jesus. I'm going to read from Luke 17, verses 11 to 19. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except for this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." Now, before we get too far into this, we need to understand a bit about this guy's life and the situation he found himself in. That starts with us asking a question: what is leprosy? Now, this gets a little bit tricky because leprosy today, also known as Hansen's disease, has our understanding of it has changed in 2,000 years. How it's transmitted, how it's passed on, how it's treated. It is a horrible illness to have. And in 1800 it was found that it was actually caused by a bacteria which was named Microbacterium leprae. And the infection of this bacteria leads to damage of nerve endings. So the lungs, the skin, and the eyes, the nerves in them get damaged. And when the nerves are damaged, what that does is it can result in a lack of ability to feel touch or pain. That in turn leads to wounds that go unnoticed. And unnoticed wounds will often get infected. And then those things that are wounded begin to rot or even fall off the body. So someone who has leprosy today is not as isolated as someone who would have had it back then. Today you can have it and you can still go to work and live with your family, and we know, you see, you can only catch it if you come into close and repeated contact with nose and mouth droplets from someone who has untreated leprosy, so we can take measures to minimise that risk. Now, that's not always been the case. It has, throughout most of history, been an illness that isolated you from everyone. So horrible is this illness, transmission had to be minimised, and if you don't know how it really spreads, and you think you can get it from the slightest touch, from eating together, through drinking water, well, you take the measures you think are necessary. So people who had it then were isolated from society. You had it and you lost everything. Family, home, job, all just gone. I mean, that's it, game over. This wasn't a sense of you have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. This was it. One diagnosis and everything you have is gone. As long as you're showing signs of it, you are cast out, because this illness terrified people. And because their understanding didn't tell you exactly how infectious it was, strong measures were taken. Leper colonies were places that used to exist right across the world because it isolated people and separated them. Now, most of those have closed today. But that's a very recent development in world history. It's only happened since we've understood and been able to treat leprosy. So when Jesus encounters 10 lepers, he's encountering 10 people who are existing solely in their own social bubble. So what was life like for these 10 men? Well, when you were diagnosed, you had a priest who had to examine you, and they would determine whether this is what you had. And if they did, you were declared ceremonially unclean, and you were cut off from society. You found yourself in a lockdown that would last you the rest of your life, unless somehow you recovered from it, which again had to be verified by a priest. It says in the scripture, Luke 17, verses 11 to 13, "On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, 'Jesus, Master, have mercy on us.'" So these men were not in the village, but they were near it. Most likely they were coming to gather food that would be left out there to help people in their position to be able to survive, but also keep socially distant. They stood at a distance, it says, and they lifted up their voices. See, they weren't allowed to come close to other people. Both Leviticus and Numbers states they were to dwell outside the camp, so the same would apply to outside the village. They were supposed to dress in torn clothes, and they were to shout "unclean" if anyone was in danger of coming too close to them. These signs were obviously in order to prevent the accidental spread. If you saw somebody dressed in torn clothes shouting "unclean," then you knew to keep your distance from them and to go around. There was no specific distance laid down in Scripture, but one authority in Israel did say it should be at least 50 yards. That's around about 45 metres or 150 feet, which is a lot more than the 2-metre regulation that we have at the moment. A lot more. Now, you were allowed to still attend synagogue to worship, but you had to arrive first, you had to leave last, and you had to be in a separate compartment that kept you isolated from everybody else while you were there. So whilst you were still allowed to worship, you weren't really allowed to be part of the crowd. That's just a show of what utter isolation these men lived their lives in. I tell you, it wasn't just a hard life. It was a very lonely life. That's why they had to lift their voices, just to be heard by Jesus. It's an interesting little social bubble that these men were in. The man we'll be focusing on is different to the rest of them, and we're told he was a Samaritan. Now, the Jews famously had no dealings with the Samaritans. There was a lot of bad blood between them in society. They did not mix. And Jesus was often controversial when he did mix with them or tell stories where they were illustrated as the hero in the story. See, this area between Samaria and Galilee, where they were in as well, would have been a place of heightened tension. But this group this man's part of the group. He's one of them. It's interesting that common tragedy breaks down barriers. It's in hard times that we should find ourselves with more in common than ever. And these men had achieved that. Interestingly, it's even been seen on occasions that when a flood surges over a piece of land, you can see animals congregating on higher ground, standing peacefully together. Animals you'd never see normally so close together, choosing to do that for the common good. I tell you, that's a lesson I believe mankind could really learn. Tragedy should bring us together. It shouldn't tear us apart. It truly is a tragedy to watch the events unfolding in America at the moment. You know, times like this where we're all going through such a hard time with the virus should show us what we have in common. Yet so often the human instinct is to create a division. And it's not right. But we also in this country need to be careful. There was a great sense of unity in this country at the start of the outbreak. But I don't know if you've noticed in the past weeks that dialogue has changed. And it's becoming more divisive. And there may well be reasons for that. But we need to be very careful that in times of tragedy we seek unity and not division. Common tragedy should cause unity and equality. It's a shame it often doesn't. But this group, these 10 men who didn't allow racial divides or political differences to get between them, they didn't let past history between two people groups cause them to be divided, because they realised when you lose everything, all you have is each other. We should learn from these guys. So here they are, this band of outcasts. Everything they have is gone. Everything they knew is gone. They survive on what is provided for them. They have no home to speak of. They're only able to spend time with each other. And then, Jesus comes to town. You know, there must have been enough of a buzz around the village that Jesus was on the way, that even those who were distant from the village, who were in this bubble, knew he was coming and knew who he was. Seems likely that they were waiting for Jesus to come close so they could call out to him, because they didn't want to miss their opportunity to receive something from Jesus. Let me tell you, there's an opportunity for you today, now, to receive something for Jesus. Don't let the opportunity just pass you by. You get Jesus' attention. You call out. You cry out to him. You take that opportunity. So they cry out. Luke 17:13 says, they lifted up their voices saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. That's all they ask him for. Mercy. And it's a kind of an indefinite request. I mean, what are they asking for? Are they asking for healing? Are they asking for food? Money? Are they asking for compassion? What do you read into that word, mercy? It's very open. And I'm sure mercy is something they'd often cry out for, because someone providing them food is an act of mercy towards them. So as they cry out, Jesus hears them. And Jesus responds to their need. He hears their cries of mercy. And I want you to know something today. Jesus hears your cries of mercy. Sometimes we don't know what to pray for. Sometimes we don't know how to ask. Sometimes all we can do is cry out, Jesus, have mercy. And you know what? That's okay. See, Jesus responds to need, not eloquence. He knows the cries of your heart. He knows the situation you're in. You don't need to explain to him, because Jesus gets it. He gets it. He doesn't want to hear your many words. He wants the honest cry from your heart. That means so much more. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And Jesus doesn't turn away. Jesus doesn't stand unmoved. He shows them the mercy that they're asking for. See, when you cry out, he hears. And he responds. And here's how Jesus responds to them. Luke 17:14. When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Go. Show yourselves to the priests. He responds to their cry for mercy by telling them to do something. To take a step of faith and to go and see the priests. And they do what Jesus asks. See, often we can ask for mercy, and then when Jesus tells us what to do, or to step out, we don't. And then we wonder why nothing's changed. If they had just stood there when Jesus had said that and muttered to themselves, well, I don't know about you guys, I was expecting a bit more than that, nothing would have changed. What happened when these guys moved was two huge things. First of all, their moving was a step of faith. You see, you don't go and head towards the priest for nothing. The moment Jesus said, "Go show yourself to the priest," they knew what that meant. You would go to the priest to get the all clear. See, belief requires action. The Bible tells us faith without works is dead. Because if you just think it might be true, or if you hold back in case it's not true, that's not faith. That's not trust. It's the same when we give Jesus our lives. It's all very well to hear a gospel message, to understand that Jesus died for you and loves you. But if you don't take that step, and it is a step of faith, to believe in him and trust in him, then nothing changes. You can even put your hand up in a meeting. If it's not you really responding to him, nothing changes. You see, the second huge thing that was happening as well is when they moved, they accepted that Jesus had authority over their lives. He said go, so they went. Why? Because they believed his answer was the right answer. The way he said to do it is the way to do it. They didn't argue with him. They didn't say, wait a minute, Jesus. I've heard you made a blind man see right away. Can't you do that? Can't you do one of your instant miracles? No, what they do is they acknowledge that Jesus has authority, he speaks with authority, and they respond to his authority. See, we don't get to tell Jesus how to answer our cry. Because we need to remember what he decides is what's right. See, Jesus has always been very clear. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No man gets to the Father except through Jesus. He was very clear that he asked people to follow him. He said he was the gate. He said, if you've seen him, you've seen God. And you can wonder all you want, there's got to be another way, there's got to be another way. Well, there isn't. And coming to Jesus acknowledges that he is the only way, he is your only hope, and he is the only one who died to take away your sin. See, you can hope all you want that there's another way other than thanking Jesus, other than calling upon Jesus, other than following Jesus as your Lord. But it doesn't change the fact that it is the only way. These three men responded to what Jesus said, and as they went, they were cleansed. It only happened when they acknowledged the authority of Jesus and took that step of faith, and all 10 men did that. How far did they get before this happened? I don't know. It's far enough that when one of them turns around and the others keep going, by the time he gets back to Jesus, they're no longer in eyesight, because Jesus asks, where are they? As they went, they were cleansed. How did they know that they'd been cleansed? It can't be just that they were cleansed of the bacteria, because first of all, they didn't know that's what caused it back then, and second of all, you can't see that. It can't be just that the damaged nerve endings came back. It's got to be something more. Something that there must have been a visible difference for them all to see it, for them to realise something had changed that gave them no uncertain doubt that they had been healed. Whatever happened to them at this moment, I tell you, it was a real transformation. The blotches, the scabbing, the rotting flesh, which are the very things that the priest would have been looking for, must have been gone. Must have been healed. I also wondered, did lost parts grow back? I don't know. But the change was so sudden and so magnificent, they all knew that they had been healed. All 10 men were healed. But only one was transformed. Luke 17 verses 15 to 16, then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. You know, no story in the Bible shows quite as powerfully the ingratitude of mankind. Jesus responded to the cries of 10 men, and he healed all 10. One says thank you. So often when we get what we want from Jesus, we don't go back to him. You know, I've seen people healed and their lives have never been changed. I've seen people who in their desperate hour have asked a Christian friend, please pray. Please ask your church to pray. And God has miraculously come through for them. Yet Jesus doesn't get acknowledged afterwards. It's not unusual. It's never been unusual. I wonder this morning as you're watching, how much has he done for you? And how often have you said thank you? All 10 took a step of faith. All 10 acknowledged that Jesus had authority, yet only one said, Jesus, thank you. 10 were physically healed. 1 also received spiritual wholeness. Because 1 realized it's not just about the gift, it's about the giver. It's not just about what Jesus can do for you, it's about getting at his feet because he means everything to you. This man fell on his face, it says. This wasn't a casual thank you. This was such a gratitude. This was worship. Because he realized Jesus is worth the worship. See, the important part of what Jesus does for you isn't the thing itself. See, what good is a healing really if you're still lost? What good is a blessing if you have no peace in it? The important part is the spiritual wholeness. The important part is the restoration that comes to our relationship with God when we fall at the feet of our Jesus. Because in the eternal picture, that's all that really matters. If a healing draws you to Jesus, a healing is a wonderful thing. If a healing doesn't, then long term that healing doesn't really matter. Now you might be sat at home right now thinking, well, it's all well and good. Jesus has never done anything like that for me. I have sickness. I've never been healed. I have problems. He never helped. I don't have a reason to be grateful like this man had. Well, I'd say you were wrong. Because Jesus did something far better for you. You have a sickness that nobody else can cure. We all do. It's called sin. And it leads to death. It leads to separation. Like those lepers. Not separation though from other people. Separation from God. See, we're all spiritual lepers. And we might not see it and we might not know it. But regardless of it's eating away at us. The damage that sin does in our lives is infectious and it's deadly. And as a world, we are in a desperate situation. And Jesus showed us mercy. Jesus came and took on the wages of sin for us. In other words, he died in our place. He bore your sin on the cross and he willingly gave his life for yours. He gave his life so that he could give you heaven. He did it for each of us. He did it for all mankind. Yet how many will come and fall at his feet? How many will come to him and say, thank you for giving your life for me? How many are willing to take the step of faith to allow his authority in their lives? The answer? Not many. What about you? Which one of those men are you like? Are you like the 9? Or are you like the 1? Can you understand what he's done and still not fall at his feet? Then I don't think you've really understood what he's done. Jesus gave his life for me. I give everything to him. Because he deserves it. Because I am so grateful to Jesus that he saved me. I'm so grateful that he is making a place for me in his Father's kingdom. See, it's not about how good you are, how clever you are, or how eloquent you are. It's not about how strong you are. Anyone can come to him and fall at his feet. And he turns none away who come to him in gratitude. It's at the feet of Jesus where you find wholeness. It's at the feet of our Saviour where you find forgiveness. It's at his feet where we show him how much we love him and how grateful we are to him. This isn't a casual, I'll try this Jesus thing out. No. It's Jesus, thank you. Thank you. I love you. I love you, Jesus. Change my life. Come to him. Follow him. and the wages of the disease of sin are undone. You are cleansed. You are made whole. I wonder today, will you come to him? Will you fall to his feet? He is the way. He is the truth. And he is the life. And no man gets to the Father except through Jesus. There's somebody watching this morning. I don't know who you are, but there's somebody. Jesus has done something for you in the past. Something great. Something you know he did it. But you've never turned back to thank him. You've never come back and said, Jesus, I just want to thank you and worship you. You've never done it. What you did is you were like the other 9 and you just kept moving. And your life didn't change. God wants to say to you today, turn back. Turn back to him. It's not too late. Fall at his feet, and he will change your life. May God bless you.